welcome back to the Blissful Badger and my March Madness Army Showcase Showdown. Throughout this month, we're going to look at all of my armies, and I'd like you to rate these armies on 5 criteria on a scale of 1 to 10. And then, at the end of the month, we're going to tally up all of the scores and see which army is the best out of my collection. So what are these criteria? 1. The paint scheme. Is my army cohesive? What level have I painted it to? Do these colors work for this army? 2. Playability. How did I go selecting models for this army? Is this a viable army on the battlefield? 3. My reason for owning it. Do I have a good justification for owning this army? 4. Theming. How much does this army fit their lore? Have I built this army to a standard that makes sense for what the army does in the lore? And 5, conversions and customization. What conversions did I make to this army? How did I make it my own? So which army are we checking out today? Today, we are looking at my Skaven. Yes. So, just as a reference point, I know not everything here is, but as I'm setting up, this is everything that is painted so far for my Skaven army. And aside from those two and a couple of that spearhead. But this is what I have painted so far for my Skaven army, which is actually saying something because there's 100 clan rats here, 20 plague monks, 10 gutter runners and 10 censer bearers, and several other things. So this is actually a fairly decent amount painted. More rats. We need more rats. Okay. So, if you notice, I have quite a few still on sprue. So, there's also quite an interesting selection and division here. So let's go through one thing at a time. First off, last year we did the Skaventide Box 2 Battlefield, and I painted up all of the Skaventide box. And so here's the spearhead, and here's the remainder. And that was a really good, solid push on my army. But before that, I had 1,000 points of Skaven already, and so I had a Plague Furnace, an Engineer, a Grey Seer on top of a Rat Ogre, because it seemed like a great idea, and I really love that model. I had 20 clan rats over here, and 20 clan rats over here, and 20 clan rats over here. These are my skewer rats. They don't have spears anymore, but should still be playable. I already had 20 plague monks. I had 10 gutter runners. Poor gutter runners, not being in the game right now. 10 plague sensor bearers. Poor plague sensor bearers not being in the game anymore. And I had kit bashed 3 Giselles. And I really like the way that my Giselles came out. But overall, I believe I have almost 2,000 points of Skaven here, playable. So long as I can take the models that are legends. I kit bashed my own Skaven Nohals while they were out of stock. I think they came out pretty nice. And overall, I have quite a few still to paint. But it's not that bad. This spearhead needs a little bit of work, but everything's at least built. Just need to paint 5 more models and it'll be done. Ah, I'm getting distracted. Haha. Okay. So, ever since the Isle of Blood box set was released and I was looking at Warhammer or Warhammer 40k as something to get into, I knew I really loved the Skaven. And it was really down to, do I collect Skaven or do I collect Tyranids? And over a decade ago, the choice was Tyranids. But I always wanted my little rats. And I continued 40k, and I collected that, and I started adding more armies. And eventually, I went, how come I'm not collecting Age of Sigmar? I mean, I was looking at Skaven back in Warhammer Fantasy times, but Sigmar was on its 3rd edition. It wasn't going anywhere anymore. It was time to branch out and look at a new game. And the Verminous Host box was available at a good price at the game shop, and so I picked one up. And then they dropped the price even more, so I picked up a second one, because more and more rats. Am I right? Of course I am. It's rats. It's Skaven. You can never have too many. So, I knew from that box that I was going to start working on some Skaven. And I did a couple of videos about building up some of my conversions. But I knew I wanted my Skaven, and I had 1,000 points painted up before 4th edition came out. And then 4th edition came out, and it was Skaventide, so I added even more. And because I can't just buy one of something, for some reason, I bought 2 Skaventide boxes. And after I got one painted up, I needed a little bit of break from my favorite Age of Sigmar army. But I did find another Skaven half at a swap meet. So now I have 3 Skaventide Skaven halves. Yay! And I also have the old Spearhead. And so that means that I have 9 Stormfiends. And I just need to paint those up at some point and, build the other 6. And I do have 40 old clan rats and 40 new clan rats still to build. That doesn't include the painting of the 60 clan rats that are built and ready to go. And it also means that I have 2 more sets of 3 Giselles and 2 more of... And I do have another unit of 3 ogres. But I also have 35. Yes, 35 more plague monks. Because, before 4th edition, you could take them in units of 10. And I was like, okay, 30 out of those 35, those can be used, and that'll be fine. I'll have a total of 50 of them available to be used. But then they made it so that it was in units of 20. And so now I have 15 extra plague monks that I can't use. So I have quite a few more rats to paint up. I think the next unit of 40 clan rats is going to have something similar to this red color for their fabric, because I have a yellow and I have an off yellow green color, and I have the green of the plague monks, and I have the denim of Skaventide. And I think that going with the next Skaventide half being that nice, lovely red color will add another level to the collection and make it so that I can have multiple clans fighting each other. So I am so happy that I did eventually start collecting my Skaven. It is such a fun army to build and paint, so long as you like hordes, which you've seen all of my armies by now, and I love myself some hordes. The more models, the better it seems, and not only that, but I actually have a couple of kit bashes planned. I want to use some of the models that I have extra and possibly make an abomination. Actually, I have plans to make 2 abominations. And it's just a matter of getting through some of my other army projects and getting a few more of these guys painted up so that I can swarm the board fully with clan rats. I think there's a way to still bring 200 in one game. I should be able to do that, right? But yeah, I'm planning on doing 2 kit-bashed abominations to add to this. I really do enjoy my kit bashes, and outside of the orc potential for kit bashing, I think the Skaven have the next highest amount available to them. I've really loved this army, and if I'm going to go play again, I'm going to bring this before I bring any of the other armies. But the Skaven army is actually the reason I own the other 3 Age of Sigmar forces. Because the rats need someone other than more rats to fight. Sometimes. I also have 4 rat swarms waiting to be painted up, if those were a thing still. Perhaps after the Escalation League, I will re-examine Age of Sigmar and see what other people want to do with the armies. I do know that there is one major drawback that has kind of put a slowdown on all of my GW, actually. And that comes down to the weapons teams and Doom Flayers. These 5 models cost me more than $100. And they're pretty much monopose. And they're things that, in a 13,000 point Skaven army, you would want to have multiples of. And although I would love to get my army to 13,000 points, I am not going to do that at those prices. So, more kit bashes for me. Let me know if you have any ideas on great conversions for Doom Wheels, because I think I need 13 of them. If you would like to see a full breakdown of my army list, there is a link to a spreadsheet in the description below. Subscribe if you haven't, so that you don't miss any future videos. I also want to thank my patrons and supporters for making these videos possible. And until next time, I hope you find your bit of bliss.